Welcome to another episode of True Therapy Stories. I'm Dr. Madison Clark. Sometimes love doesn't end suddenly. It simply dries up, like a flower forgotten in a vase without water. And one day, you realize that the place you once called home is no longer a home. It's a silent prison. That's what happened to Clara. On an ordinary night after dinner, she began to sweat cold. Her heart was racing. Her hands were trembling. And in the middle of the kitchen, with her mother-in-law criticizing and her husband silent, Clara thought she was dying. It wasn't a heart attack. It was a panic attack. She ran to the bathroom, sat on the floor, hugged her knees, and thought, if I cry now, my kids will see me fall apart. And there, between the cold tiles and the sound of her own heartbeat, she realized that no one notices when a woman is about to break until she finally breaks. This is the story of a woman who loved too much, but lost herself trying to please everyone. The story of a marriage suffocated by guilt, and of a mother-in-law who confused love with control. I'm Dr. Madison Clark, and this is today's episode of True Therapy Stories.
Clara and James had been married for 18 years. They had 2 children, a simple house, and a quiet routine, until the day James's father passed away. His mother, Evelyn, was left alone. "She can stay with us for a while," James said. Clara took a deep breath. "For a while," she replied. But that while turned into 4 years. Evelyn arrived with suitcases, memories, and the strong scent of floral perfume. At first, she seemed kind. Then, she began to rearrange the house. She removed the painting Clara had made and replaced it with a wedding photo of her son. "Sweetheart, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive," Evelyn said with a smile. And that's how the house slowly changed owners in silence. My advice, when I hear stories like Clara and James's, is simple. Empathy is beautiful, but it needs boundaries. For a while, needs a date, a limit, an agreement. Love without boundaries becomes invasion disguised as kindness. Evelyn began giving orders. "This rice is too dry. James hates it that way. These kids spend too much time on their phones. You should be more patient, Clara." James stayed quiet. "She's my mother. Be understanding." But patience, when it only comes from one side, becomes an open wound. My advice here is clear. Controlling people rarely see what they're doing. They think they're helping, but they're actually taking someone else's place. And control, repeated day after day, kills freedom and love. James loved them both, his mother and his wife. But loving is not the same as knowing how to love. When Evelyn and Clara argued, he withdrew. He thought silence meant neutrality, but his silence was emotional absence. Clara began to feel angry, not at her mother-in-law, but at the man who never defended her. When silence replaces the voice, my advice is always the same. Silence in the face of injustice isn't peace. It's emotional cowardice. Those who refuse to take a stand allow others to bleed alone. Evelyn started entering their bedroom without knocking. "Do you still love my son?" she asked, smiling playfully. Clara no longer had privacy. The home that once felt light became a confessional where she was always the sinner. My advice, especially for those living with someone invasive, is this: to invade another's space, even out of love, is a form of emotional violence. Trust only grows where respect and limits exist. Their eldest son began eating dinner in his room. Their 11-year-old daughter stopped bringing friends over. "Your grandmother is difficult," Clara said. "You're mean to her," James replied. Until one day, the little girl asked, "Mom, why does Grandma get to be the boss here?" Clara cried quietly, locked in the bathroom. Even the children knew it now. She had lost her place inside her own home. When I see a confused child caught in family conflict, my advice is this: children don't remember what you say. They remember how they feel around you. Sunday, roast chicken. Evelyn, dry again. James tried to ignore it. Clara stood up and said, "I can't live like this anymore." Evelyn smiled with irony. "Be grateful you have such a good husband." Clara answered firmly, "I'd be grateful if he were mine, not yours." The air grew heavy. Her heart raced. Her hands shook. And suddenly, her body went into panic. In the bathroom, leaning against the wall, Clara tried to breathe. Her chest tightened. Cold sweat ran down her face. Her hands tingled. She thought she was dying. Her daughter appeared in the doorway. "Mom?" Clara quickly wiped her face. "I'm fine, sweetheart." But she wasn't. Inside, something was screaming for help. When a patient describes a panic attack, I always say, it's the body speaking when the mind has been ignored for too long. My advice is listen to your body before it stops trying to warn you. Sitting on the cold tile, Clara looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. "Maybe I need a psychologist or a psychiatrist," she whispered. And for the first time, she spoke honestly to herself. That whisper was the first step towards healing. To those who believe asking for help is weakness, my advice is the opposite. Asking for help is an act of courage, a silent scream that says, "I want to live." James was sleeping on the couch. Clara left a note on the table. Either she goes or I do. My advice for those who stay silent until they break is this: if you don't make a decision, someone else will make it for you. Silence is always a response. One rainy night, James walked into the kitchen and said, "Mom, you have to go." "Evelyn, are you throwing me out?" "No, Mom. I'm trying to save what's left." For the first time, James understood what emotional courage meant. When a man finally takes a stand, my advice is to remember. Mature love doesn't imprison, it understands. Sometimes you have to step aside so the other can breathe. Evelyn moved out. The house grew silent, but the silence wasn't peace. It was grief. Clara looked around and realized their marriage was intact in the body, but dead in the soul. After chaos comes the echo. And my advice is that echo reminds us, you either rebuild or you accept the end. Clara began therapy. She discovered she feared rejection and spent her life trying to be the good one to avoid being abandoned. Now she was learning to love others without disappearing. My advice for those who live to please everyone is when you try to please everyone, you forget what's real. Healing begins when you choose yourself without guilt. I had a panic attack, Clara said. I failed you, James replied. For the first time, his tears were sincere. Let's try again, not to go back to what we were, but to start over. My advice for couples who want to rebuild is saying I was wrong is the beginning of emotional reconciliation. There's no healing without vulnerability. James visited his mother. I love you, Mom, but I need to be a husband now. Evelyn whispered, no one ever taught me how to be alone. And in that moment, she too began to heal her own loneliness. My advice is this: understanding someone's pain doesn't justify their mistakes, but it breaks the cycle of repetition. Now, the rules had changed. No one entered the other's room without knocking. Decisions were made together. Clara started painting again. James asked, "What's your favorite color?" I said, "Daisy green." He said, "Then that's mine too." Marriages aren't saved by grand gestures, but by small, consistent acts. This is my final advice for those rebuilding. Don't wait for the other person to change first. Be the first to change how you love. If you've ever lived something like this, you know what it's like to feel your chest tighten in the kitchen and hold back tears so your children won't see. Maybe you've thought about therapy, but felt ashamed, thinking it meant weakness. It's not weakness, it's rebirth. Peace doesn't grow where boundaries are ignored. Saying enough is saying, I want to live. And when you choose yourself, your home becomes a home again. My final advice is this. Nowadays, a mother doesn't have to move in with her son to interfere in his marriage. Sometimes she stays in her own home, but calls every day. She sends messages, gives opinions about everything, or leaves subtle remarks. You don't visit me anymore. Since you got married, you've changed. Your wife doesn't seem to support you. And what was meant to be love turns into guilt. The same guilt that imprisoned James, the one that made him stay silent because he didn't want to hurt his mother or lose his wife. And in the middle of that silent triangle, he began to disappear emotionally. I see this often in my sessions. Mature, intelligent couples who love each other, yet live with a third invisible presence inside their relationship, the family's opinion. It could be a mother, a father, a sister, a father-in-law, or even a friend who feels entitled to interfere. We live in a time when physical distance no longer prevents emotional invasion. Technology brought closeness, but also surveillance. Today, many couples sleep together, but share their hearts with a phone in hand, reading messages from relatives who judge, advise, and tell them what should be done. And the home ceases to be a refuge. It becomes an extension of the parents' house. I remember a patient who told me, "Doctor, my mom lives 3,000 miles away, but it feels like she lives inside my marriage." And I asked why. She answered, "Because before every decision, I hear her voice in my head." This is the kind of invisible prison that destroys you slowly. The body is free, but the mind still obeys an old authority. In the US, we call this emotional enmeshment, when there are no clear boundaries between me and the other, between what is love and what is control. And it's not just between mothers and sons. Many fathers also interfere, criticizing their daughter-in-law, doubting the son's wife, or acting like the man of the house, even when their son is grown. They say, "I only want what's best for you." But what they really mean is, "I still want to be the main voice in your life." When this happens, Couples live in a constant state of defense, not against each other, but against the shadow of the family that still decides for them. And that's how love begins to suffocate, not from lack of feeling, but from too much interference. When I think of Clara and James, I think of how many Claras there are today, trying to balance respect and sanity. Many of them don't live under the same roof as their in-laws, but they live under guilt. And guilt is one of the most effective forms of emotional control. The words may change, but the effect is the same. You hardly ever call me. If it were your mother, you'd help. You don't care about family anymore. Those small phrases act like hooks. They pull the child back into the role they should have outgrown, the obedient child. And while he tries to please everyone, his wife feels alone. Modern marriage faces an old dilemma: the lack of clear boundaries between love and loyalty. Many men, and women too, don't know how to balance love for their parents with respect for their partner. They confuse obedience with gratitude. To be grateful is different from being submissive. Gratitude acknowledges what was done. Submission erases who you are. In America, we talk a lot about boundaries, but the concept is still misunderstood. A boundary is not coldness, it's structured love. It's saying, I love you, but this part of my life is mine. And when a couple learns that, they begin to mature emotionally. Sometimes the interference comes from elsewhere: siblings who always give opinions, aunts who criticize, friends who only want to help. Each adds a pinch of reason and a spoonful of emotional poison. The worst part is, they rarely realize the damage they cause, because control often comes disguised as concern. And concern, when repeated without respect, becomes invasion. I remember a recent case: a peaceful couple until the husband's father began to help too much. He paid their bills, decided what they should buy, where they should live. When the son finally set boundaries, the father said, "I'm just trying to protect you from suffering." But the suffering was already there. A man who couldn't make a decision without feeling guilty, and a woman who felt diminished, as if her marriage was an extension of her in-laws' house. When love has no limit, it stops being love. It becomes domination. Helping is beautiful, but helping without being asked is taking control disguised as kindness. And many families confuse love with control. Clara and James lived this under one roof, but today thousands of couples live the same story through texts, good intentions, or fear of breaking ties. The result is the same: exhausted hearts trying to balance love and freedom. I know, no one wants to hurt their parents, but love is not obedience. Love is understanding where the other ends and where you begin. Clara had to lose her breath to realize this. Today, I see many patients learning it before they collapse. But her story reminds us, when the heart goes silent, the body speaks. And sometimes the boundary you fail to set with words, your body sets through symptoms. Anxiety, insomnia, heart palpitations, or that constant feeling of walking on eggshells, afraid to disappoint everyone. These are the modern signs of a soul without borders. Sometimes the deepest trauma doesn't come from shouting, it comes from constant silence, from that feeling that your life is never yours truly, that no matter how much you try to build something with the person you love, there's always someone outside, a parent, a sibling, an aunt who has an opinion about everything. And that's how peace slowly disappears, unnoticed. When family interference becomes constant, the body reacts. The brain enters emotional survival mode. You stop living and start defending yourself. Many couples tell me, "Doctor, we don't fight anymore." And I always ask, "Did you make peace? Or did you just go quiet?" Because silence is not always peace. Sometimes it's the most dangerous symptom of all. Clara began having panic attacks, but before the body spoke, her mind was already exhausted. She was always on alert, watching Evelyn's expressions, James's tone, trying to be the good daughter-in-law. It was like living on the stage where any mistake could become criticism. And that's one of the greatest emotional pains I see in women today, the exhaustion of having to appear calm while carrying the burden of keeping the peace. In therapy, I often say, when you live to avoid conflict, you become your own internal conflict. The mind collapses, trying to balance two opposite forces, the desire to be free and the fear of disappointing others. Think of how many times you've heard, "But it's your mother," "But it's your father." You have to understand, they raised you. Yes, they raised you, but raising is not owning. Being someone's child doesn't mean living in eternal debt. There's a huge difference between honoring your parents and erasing yourself for them. To honor is to acknowledge the past. To erase yourself is to repeat the pattern. And the most common pattern is guilt. Guilt is one of the most powerful and most destructive emotions within families. It makes adults act like children. It makes wives feel selfish for wanting privacy. It makes husbands feel ungrateful for saying no. And little by little, couples stop talking about what they feel and start talking about what others will think. In a recent session, an American patient told me, "I can't sleep, Dr. Clark. My mom calls every night just to say she's lonely. And when I don't answer, she texts, 'Don't worry, one day I won't be here anymore.'" She sighed and said, "I know it's manipulation, but still, I feel guilty." This is one of the subtlest and most cruel forms of emotional imprisonment, emotional blackmail. It doesn't need shouting or threats. Just one guilt-laden sentence can destroy your boundaries. And that's how many adult children end up living between two homes, yet belonging to none. In James's case, the prison was silent. He loved his mother, but also loved his wife. And out of fear of losing either, he lost himself. When he said, "She's my mother, please be understanding," what he really meant was, "I don't know how to choose without feeling guilty." Evelyn, the mother, didn't realize what she was doing either.
Evelyn's loneliness made her interfere without realizing it. Like many parents who never cut the umbilical cord, they just stretch it through messages and opinions. Love without boundaries becomes control. Even loving parents can be toxic, and healing begins when someone has the courage to recognize that with maturity. When children live in fear of disappointing their parents, love loses its air. Authenticity is the oxygen of love. Without it, the relationship suffocates. Many modern couples are trapped in generational emotional dependence, defending their family sides and forgetting their own bond. In the U.S., this is common. Parents raised on lifelong loyalty and children raised for independence but feeling guilty when they live it. The result is a silent conflict. Parents feel forgotten, children feel controlled. Many parents interfere not out of malice, but out of fear of losing their purpose. They confuse a child's no with ingratitude when it's actually the birth of autonomy. Mature love doesn't control, It knows how to exist without needing to be necessary all the time. Emotionally mature families understand that boundaries preserve love. Just as a fence protects a garden, emotional limits protect relationships. When James told his mother, "You need to go," he wasn't rejecting her, he was growing up. And only then could everyone finally breathe. Because love that holds too tightly makes you sick, but love that lets go heals. I'm Dr. Madison Clark, and this was today's final piece of advice on true therapy stories. Before you go, there's something special waiting for you in the description. It's a simple daily guide, something you can read or listen to every day, or even share with someone who needs it. Go take a look. I'll see you in our next session.